Welcome back to What You Will Learn. My name is Adam Ashton.
And my name is Adam Jones. Today we are doing our Q&A episode. So the questions we got from everybody. So thanks for everybody who submitted questions. We'll try and get through as many as we can today. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping matters.
Yeah, a couple of quick announcements. The first one was we really enjoyed doing these Q&A style things. So we enjoyed getting your questions. And we're thinking, if you guys enjoy it too, we'll probably do it again in 6 months at the end of the season. If you want to ask a question at any time, you can head to whatyouwilllearn.com/question and you can record your audio question there.
And for those interested, we've recently been interviewed ourselves by Steve Glaveski, the host of the Future Squared podcast, which is another really renowned podcast in Melbourne. So if you're interested in hearing us being interviewed, head there and check it out.
Yeah, Steve's a legend. He's going to be on our show next week. He's launching a brand new book, and when we're going to interview him, he interviewed us. And check it out, Future Squared, and you'll find the episode with Adam Ashton and Adam Jones.
First question from Leanne.
Hi guys, I know this is a really tough question, but what's the best thing each of you have learnt from all of the books that you've read and reviewed? Thank you.
We have read a lot of books. I think we're up to about 130 or so on the podcast of books that we've reviewed. We're probably over 200 each in terms of the books that we've read. So there's a lot to choose from. I think for me, my favourite lesson and the one that's had a big impact is Seth Godin, The Dip. And it's just the idea that, we've got this false idea out there that, winners never quit and quitters never win. So we think we should never quit. Just persistence is the way to go. If you're facing, any troubles, just keep pushing through it and you'll get there eventually. But he's saying that that's not necessarily true and that winners actually do quit. They quit a lot. They just quit the right things at the right time. So we go through this thing called the dip, where at the start of any new project, we see some initial wins. Like perhaps we're writing a book, and at the very start, our wins are that we maybe write our first page, and then maybe we tell a few friends that we're writing a book and we get some praise from them. So there's some wins. But very shortly after, increased effort does not lead to increased reward. So that's just the long slog called the dip, where you're in that trough of just slogging it away. And it isn't until the very end that you achieve exponential success. So he says that the dip is good because there's scarcity there, and the scarcity makes it valuable to get through the dip. But the issue is that people quit right in the middle of the dip. That's the worst place to quit. So my takeaway from that is you got to either quit before you even get started. So realize there is a dip and realize that if it's not something you're going to commit to, then quit before you even start. Or realize, hey, there's a dip here and I'm committed to seeing my way through it and not quitting right in the middle because that's the worst time to quit. So I love it. The Dip by Seth Godin.
That's a ripper, Ashto. Picking the dip. So yeah, as you said, we've read hundreds of books. For me, I'm going to make a little cocktail of a few different concepts, but really mix into the same kind of idea. And it's the idea that the whole world is uncertain and how to capitalize on this uncertainty. So it probably starts with the idea from the Black Swan. And the whole concept of the Black Swan was the idea that before the discovery of Australia, the whole world believed that all swans were white, and then they discovered Australia, and then they found the first black swan. So all the previous beliefs that all swans were white was topped on its head, and then they had a whole new paradigm of belief. So with this, it's the understanding that everything we know right now is completely uncertain, and this is at the cultural level, but also at the personal level. So there is a lot of uncertainty with everything you do and what is out there in the world. So because it's uncertain, we can actually capitalize on this and then really go after positive serendipity and inject a bit of that into your lives. And the way to do this is injecting some other books, things like Lean Startup. So because the world is uncertain, you might want to go out there and take a lot of minimum bets, test a lot of little assumptions about different things. In other words, throwing a lot of shit against the wall, waiting and seeing what actually sticks on the wall, and then you can actually go hard on it. So once you know what once you've chosen an MVP and you found something that works, then you might pick that as your dip to go forward, just to link it to what your answer was, Ashto.
I like it, mate. I like it how they link together there. The next question is a written question from Michael from Australia. What books are you most looking forward to reviewing in 2019?
So to be honest, Michael, we don't really plan that far ahead when it comes to the books we're reading. So I'll give you an answer of what I'm genuinely interested in learning a lot more about in 2019. And for me personally, it's I'm all of a sudden really interested in investing a little bit more. So that might be at the macroeconomic level or down to your individual investing and building a portfolio. So with that in mind, something we do have coming up soon is Benjamin Graham, the Intelligent Investor, which is really, he's known as the godfather of value investing, and Warren Buffett sees him as his number one, and Warren Buffett
he's done pretty well, man, in terms of investing.
Done pretty well. Absolutely.
Yeah, mate, we don't really plan that far ahead. We haven't got a list of 50 books we're going to read this year or anything. But some things on Seth Godin's brand new book, This is Marketing. Originals, which is by Adam Grant. I like listening to Adam Grant on podcasts that I've heard. I've actually never read any of his books, so I'm keen to read some of his books. And yeah, I don't know. I wish I had a better answer, but there we go. Another sort of similar question that we sort of veered towards is Richie from Australia, who asked, how do you decide what to read next? And again, we just sort of, I guess we've got a whole bunch of books that we want to read. I've got 2 bookshelves, each with 6 shelves on them. I've read 4 shelves, so that means I've got, 8 shelves of books that I haven't read yet. So we just, we seem to just, every time we buy like 8 books and read 3 of them and just keep adding to the list. So every time we get interested in something, we'll pick it, and then we just pick something off the shelf that we're liking.
Absolutely. The unread book list keeps piling on, because I think both of us don't see it as a bad investment spending money on books. So because we value it so much, we easily just let the money flow into books, and then they just arrive, week by week.
Next one is an audio question. Joelle from London.
Hi, Adam and Adam. It's Joelle here from London. I really love listening to your podcast, and I find that it gives me so many tips about how to go about different things in life. Quite often I find that when I listen to the podcast, I'll hear something that you guys say, or a different way a book explains something, and I always think that's a great idea, but then it never happens in day-to-day life. And I wondered if you had any advice about how to make sure that you put those key messages into practice.
It definitely is a tough one. It's one you got to balance. We read a lot, and we read so much that sometimes it is hard to apply those lessons, whether it's reading books or listening to podcasts or, watching, taking online courses, whatever it is, you're going to learn cool ideas. It might be sometimes hard to think, when can you apply them? I think a good way to do it is to just view it as a test. So say, for example, the podcast, maybe if you listen every week and you hear a book each week, and you'd like one idea and think, okay, for this week, I'm going to do a little test. And the way to do that test is to view it as, say, a mini habit, a book we did a fair while back, making something ridiculously small that it's hard not to do. So pick something super, super small that you can do and view it as a test for a week. It might work, it might not. One example could be, say, the most recent book we did was Steal Like an Artist, talking about how you don't have to be completely original, but, share other people's work. As a way to get started in adding more creativity into your life. So perhaps a 1-week test is think, for the next 5 days, I'm going to read an article online, and if I like it, I'm going to share it on my Facebook page. So maybe that's your one test, is how can you apply an idea from Steal Like an Artist? So something super small, you don't have to commit to doing it every single day forever, but find something ridiculously small you can do and view it as a test for a week and see what sticks.
So for me, Joel, I think books fall into 2 different categories. We read everything as non-fiction. So in every book, you're going to increase your knowledge and increase your understanding, and you're going to learn a whole bunch of stuff. There's a subsection out of that with ones that you can take specific actions about. And if it's the ones that you want to take more actions in your life, it definitely does fall into the category of habit formation. If you want to be more consistent in taking action and so forth, installing it as a habit will make sure it doesn't require any near as amount of willpower. So as Asho just said, any way you can try and form a habit into your life, and it might take 30 to 60 days or whatever, but once it's in there, it won't take any willpower, and it'll be really easy for whatever you're trying to do.
Hey Adams, I'm Gavin from California. I'm a student at Santa Clara University, but I just spent a semester abroad in Bologna, Italy, and right now I'm actually recording this from Oslo, Norway. I know that successful people spend lots of time reading, and I myself love reading, but sometimes I wonder if I should be spending less time reading and more time working on personal projects or applying lessons from the books that I've already read. Do you have any thoughts on this balance of learning to doing, or on whether sometimes it's better to focus on personal projects besides reading for a period of time? Thanks.
Thanks, Gavin. For me, if you had, say, in your week, you had 1 hour spare and you had to choose between two options, and one was sharing a scary LinkedIn post about your new business you're about to start, or you had that 1 hour to read, say, The War of Art, which is an incredible book all about beating the resistance to be able to share what you've created. In that case, where it's binary, definitely go out and share the LinkedIn post and spend your 1 hour on that, like hands down. But I think books shouldn't be seen as something that's stealing time away from the thing you should be taking action on. It should be seen as something to go along with it. So we're not saying go out there and read 14 hours a day where you could be working on something cool. All you need to do is probably read one hour to 2 hours a day, and then what you do your action on will be it'll be like a catalyst for the thing you're working on, and you'll be making better decisions and be working on better things and so forth. So they don't necessarily go against each other, but if they do happen to come against each other, always taking action is definitely better than just reading things.
Yeah, nice. Good answer, man. I think you got to look at how you're reading and why you're reading. I think it's great that you are reading. If you're reading for procrastination to avoid doing things, then you're probably reading too much. If you're reading to, as you say, mate, fuel those personal projects, then that's definitely a good thing. I think the books, sometimes, maybe if it's a specific book like the 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing, then you're learning marketing lessons to apply directly to your project. Or perhaps it's something like The Obstacle is a Way. There's nothing specific that you're going to be applying to your project, but it's going to shift your perspective a little bit and change how you look at the world. So I think it comes down to why you're reading and how you're reading. If you've got a personal project, definitely keep working on that and use reading to fuel that rather than to go against that.
Hello, Adam and Ellen. I'm Patrick from Germany, and I love your podcast, despite the fact that you don't like Bismarck and his invention of the social laws and insurance. Just kidding. So I have 3 questions for you. The first is, are there any recurring patterns in the books you read about success, work, habits, happiness, and so on, so that you would say, stick with these and your life should be better?
Cheers, Patrick. Appreciate the gag from the happiness equation as well. Adam Jones apparently doesn't like retirement. And we're also going to tie in, Kevin from Australia wrote in a similar question. What is the takeaway principle that you've learnt from any books that you use most often? So we're going to sort of combine these 2 questions here into talking about different areas of our life that the same lessons sort of keep coming up in different sort of books.
So we go very wide with our books and in different areas and categories. I think in the area of business career, if we mold them together, one really important thing that comes up in a lot of books, whether it's So Good They Can't Ignore You, Tribes, even 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing and so forth, but it's this idea of go out there and get scarce skills. If everybody can do what you can do, then there's no scarcity and there's no value in it. So in any way you can, go out and hunt scarcity.
Yeah, definitely. Another one is try things. I think it's pretty simple to say try things, but I don't think a lot of people do. I think a lot of people get comfortable, they're in their routine, and they just keep doing what they keep doing. So I think it's important to try things. So like books like The Click Moment, Poke the Box about taking initiative, The Lean Startup, Black Swan, all these ideas about, just try different things. You don't actually know what's going to work, so try a whole bunch of different things so you can find out.
Yeah, a bit of positive serendipity might just sneak in there. Another thing in the area of career and business would be definitely prioritization. It comes up a lot. I mean, the one thing it talks about, choose only just one thing. What's the one thing that makes everything else easier or irrelevant? And if you just keep knocking that off and that off, you might only do 3 or 4 hours of really productive work each day, but you're really doing the most effective and most difficult thing.
Yeah, definitely. Effectiveness over efficiency is a big one that comes up in a lot of books. In a broader personal development sense, something that comes up a fair bit is like listening and empathy. Like say 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. One of the habits is seek first to understand and then to be understood. Or like How to Win Friends and Influence People talks a lot about how whenever we're talking, we just are waiting for the other person to finish so we can say what we're going to say next. And we never really listen to them.
Yeah, and even in Laws of Human Nature, in the area of empathy, it says like a lot of us are really narcissistic, just thinking about ourselves. If we can just transmute that into our brain, just thinking what the other person's perspective is, that can be very powerful as well.
Definitely. Another big a common thread that we try to do is getting outside your comfort zone. So I know the 4-Hour Workweek talks about it. Daring Greatly talks about getting in the arena, the War of Art. These are all things about being uncomfortable. So not just sticking with what you know, but getting outside your comfort zone.
Because if you've got goals that are stretching you to be bigger than you are today, the only way to achieve bigger goals is actually to grow yourself. And if you really think about it, the only way to actually grow is to do things that are uncomfortable. And you probably don't want to go too far, too uncomfortable, but you definitely want to be going too easy. You just want to be Goldilocks, just right, always challenging yourself in some way.
Yeah, I like that. Another big one that I think comes up a lot in a lot of different types of books that we read is this idea that we have so many cognitive biases and there are so many limits to our psychology that we really don't know what the hell is going on. So a few things we need to do is have an open mind. Don't be so strong in your beliefs. Ask questions. Be open to different ideas. Keep learning, books, podcasts, online courses, wherever you can. Learn from different people, different ideas. And you're never going to know the right answer. So view your decisions as bets. Don't overcommit. View it as a test. Try it out and then learn as you go because you're never going to know before you start.
It's like that Eastern saying, empty cup.
Oh, yeah.
So it kind of ties in, with, if you look at influence, persuasion, predictably irrational, win bigly, there's so many biases and so many things that you don't understand what is really controlling your brain that sends you in the wrong direction to what the objective reality is. You're probably wrong in a lot of different areas. So having that empty cup and open mind, you can actually probably get a little bit closer to objective truth, such as survivor's a crock of shit.
The second question is, how did your lives change because of the books you read? For example, one of you stopped smoking, one of you quit social media. Is there anything else?
Yeah, quitting social media was a big one for me recently. When I say quitting, I deleted the apps off my phone. I probably check still maybe once or twice a week, but the notifications I'm getting are pretty lame, man. I used to probably check it 10 times a day, and now I'm checking once or twice a week, and I'm still not getting too much out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Facebook's getting desperate with their notification, don't they?
Mate, some of those notifications.
It's like someone you haven't spoken to in 6 years posted a photo about some party or something. Like, I really don't give a shit. Facebook.
Yeah, ridiculous. Yeah, if I open up to 84 notifications, there's probably 3 genuine notifications in there. But in a more broader sense, how it's, I guess, improved or changed my life, I think it's just the way that I'm spending my time and my outlook on life. I think it's more about constant learning, constant growth, but also about viewing it with a bit more of a long-term perspective rather than always looking for the shortcut, quick fix, overnight millionaire sort of stuff. View it more as a long game. Yeah,
I think it's similar. Like you were probably previously drawn into bullshit. I must say, so was I. I think if you
look back to say our first 6 months and the types of books we did in the first 6 months compared to the last 6 months we've just done, they're very different sorts of books, and that probably tells you a fair bit about where we were. And what
absolutely.
We're
I think we can both smell a lot of bullshit before it, whether it's in books, whether it be someone speaking at a seminar, whether it be someone speaking on TV or the radio. When you just get such a broad breadth of books that you've read, you can really see through them a lot of the time, which is really big. So I think in terms of directing yourself, you really generate a really good compass in what direction to go in life.
Definitely.
So yeah, for me, as you said, the big papa was quitting smoking. I can't describe how big a change that has been for me and my family and everyone who gave that book. And again, quitting alcohol again for the third time, if I can say that. But it's going to work out to be, multiple years without booze. Another one to be, similar to smelling bullshit is just a little corny, kind of selfish one, but just the status of seeming smarter.
Yeah. No, I think that's a big one, man. I think it's a big one. I think it's probably, we just talked about how it's not good to think that you know everything. in the previous question.
It's good sometimes. Eh?
I think it's definitely a big one. But you know, having that status as you read a book a week, it definitely adds a lot.
And you can reel off
energy.
a really interesting insight that Yuval Noah Harari worked for 6 years on, or Robert Greene worked for 6 years on, and so forth. You can just reel it out at a barbecue and own it and claim the idea.
I think the overconfidence is not good, but confidence and just a strong confidence is probably a good thing, which comes from reading a lot of books. Yeah.
And I think a big obvious one is in terms of career choice, and very similar to a question we got from Jeanette from Melbourne, who asked, have you seen a benefit in your professional lives after reading so many business books?
Yeah, for me, I was, when I first finished uni and started in a big corporate, I was in a big bank, and it was very easy to hide. And it was I got very good at hiding, and I got very good at doing almost nothing and getting away with it, which is not a good thing for the long term, that's for sure. So recently I've got out of the big corporate and I'm in a small startup doing marketing where there's nowhere to hide. If I don't do something, it doesn't get done. And it's very quickly obvious who didn't do that.
Yes.
So there's definitely nowhere to hide. I'm also focusing on the skills. So, you know, previously doing spreadsheets and PowerPoints, you know, and writing reports that never got read. Now it's a lot more actionable real world skills that I'm learning along the way. So whilst it's good learning at the moment, but it's also good for the future, those skills I'll have as well.
Yeah, again, I've got a similar story to you. I, straight out of uni, doing structural engineering, I went to a big stereotypically, you know, incredible job working for a big corporate firm, which everyone dreams of working for, you know, one of the big dogs. But similar to you, everyone can hide in the big corporate. Nothing really seems to get done. And there wasn't a lot of the things that Dan Pink talks about in Drive that really give you that satisfaction from work, which is, you know, autonomy and purpose and mastery. So understanding that and understanding what we were saying earlier about in terms of scarcity, I moved a big sidestep in my career to what a lot of people would have thought was a bad move, but I know without a shadow of a doubt it was a great move because I do have a lot more autonomy and a lot more purpose in my work, and I'm learning skills that are much more scarce, mainly because everyone in corporate sees what I've done as a bad move. But yeah, I'm definitely getting the benefits of scarcity, and I don't think I would have got this move if I hadn't have strengthened my compass of what a good direction is, which I've learned from books.
Yeah, it's a good overview. Yeah, the autonomy, mastery, purpose. I think there's little autonomy, little purpose sometimes. So if you're looking for a good job, you're definitely looking for those autonomy, mastery, purpose.
Mate, yeah, just to paint the picture, I went from like working inside a big corporate office, and now on a Friday, just, you know, working butt naked in the top story in the sun of my where I'm renting.
If you're looking for a new job, that's one of the criteria.
That's autonomy, mate.
And third question, sometimes it seems that in your podcast you are really blown away and amazed by a book and even have an interview with the author. But when I go over to your website, one of you or even both of you rated the book like 5 out of 10, for example. So could you explain how you actually rate the books on your website? Yeah, that's it. That's the questions I have. Keep up with the good work and hope to hear you soon.
It's a good question. Every book we rate out of 10 and we put on our website, whatyouwilllearn.com/book, or if you're on the monthly email updates, we put our out of 10s in there as well. I will preface it by saying it's extremely subjective and it's extremely dependent on the point in time at which we read it as well. So, for example, like when I first read Rich Dad Poor Dad, I gave it a 10 out of 10. When we reread it about 6 weeks ago, it's probably now an 8 out of 10. So it's very dependent on when I read the book as well. A few things, though, that I take into consideration. One is the lessons. That's absolutely vital. I've got to learn something out of the book. Unfortunately, some books would suffer because obviously the first time you hear something, it's brand new, it's amazing, it's a wild new concept. Second time, third time, fourth time you hear it, it's probably not as impactful. So books, the order in which I read books probably affects the rating I give the books as well. I think on top of just the lessons, though, I'm sort of half thinking about, would I recommend this to somebody else to read? And one of those things that I take into consideration is it has to be like digestible. For example, like Jordan Peterson, 12 Rules for Life. I thought the 12 Rules themselves were sick, but it was a bloody slog to read. Hero with 1,000 Faces was an absolute mission to read. So those books I rated lower because I wouldn't recommend someone else read it if they hadn't read a whole bunch of books before, and it was tough to get to the gold. And on a sort of similar vein, I like books that are as long as they need to be and not longer. Like, say, an unfortunate example is Deep Work. Obviously, Deep Work, after reading I Quit Social Media, it's had a massive impact on me. But the book was probably 30 pages worth of juice, but I had to read 300 pages to get there. So compare that to, say, Seth Godin, where it's in 80 pages and you get 80 pages of good stuff out there. I'll probably, maybe get 70 pages of good stuff out of the 80. So reading more than I have to, 10 times for, 1/10 of the benefit is probably goes down in my books.
Yeah. So I got this same criteria as you, except for that you need every page of the book to be riveting and a little bit like the Harry Potter effect.
I didn't say that. I didn't say every page has to be riveting.
Anyone wants to find out the Harry Potter effect, maybe that's for the next Q&A.
No, we asked people. No one asked.
So I'm happy to crawl through the 300 page of shit just to get a little bit of gold. I see it as, the way I look at it is like $30, 10 hours. If I get something small from it, something might mean, a big paradigm shift. So that's looking at the world differently. And, a book like 21 Lessons for the 21st Century is massive in that regard, or it might change your habits. So again, it's not the most riveting book to read and most dense in terms of learnings. Alan Carr and I'd say Deep Work is like that. It's massive habit changes from it, even though it's not densely precise on what the aim of the book is, or even strategy. So Lean Startup, after reading that book, I've got a whole different approach to how I look at business and testing ideas and so forth. So in all those cases, they weren't incredibly dense, but there was a huge takeaway from it. So that's the main criteria for me.
I think that's a good point, and Lean Startup is probably another good example that I love the main concept of the book, but there's 300 pages of other stuff that didn't add to the overall book, so it probably suffers in my rating. Maybe it's a bad way to rate books.
No,
you would say it is.
I'd say it is.
But I'd say Deep Work, one lesson, massive impact. I think it's great, but I don't know if I'd recommend somebody else read it for that book. I'd rather them read the 10-page essay that Cal Newport wrote instead.
So I think, this is probably getting down to the crux of things. So for you, it would be like the 10-page essay, which is incredibly dense and all extremely relevant and incredible.
Not dense per se, but like if he's got a point, I want to read the point for sure, yeah.
But I think for me, a book, 300 pages, got a special thing above a short blog post or a short summary, that there is a lot of tension build up and release in a book. And for, I don't know, whatever reason, it's hard to explain, a book does sit with you and digest a lot better. I mean, if you compare that to a blog post, I basically remember 0 blog posts in my whole life. And I'd say that's not quite a 10-page summary, but it's on the spectrum closer to that. So I think a book does sit with you for much longer and so forth. So a 300-page Deep Work, I think, would have a better chance of someone quitting social media by a big factor.
Yeah, actually, that's probably a fair point. There's a big placebo effect to the books, and we talk about that a lot. That some books that we say, oh, this was just someone had a blog, and there was a bunch of blog posts, and their publisher said you can't make an 80-page book, you have to make a 250-page book.
Subtle art and not giving a fuck. That's a great example of that.
They fill it up with 4 times as much content, which is a bit of fluff. But there is that placebo effect of the book. If it's a big book, if it's it feels heavy and it looks professional, you associate more weight to that argument as opposed to a clickbaity article that you read. You probably dismiss it. So I definitely agree with that as well.
Hey Adams, love the show. So after reading Peter Singer's The Life You Can Save, you both seem pretty convinced that we're morally obligated to help out the poor. I was just wondering, do you donate 5% or 10% of your annual income to effective charities?
There are a lot of assumptions built into that question.
Yeah, it seems like a loaded question filled with a lot of skepticism.
We didn't hear who that was from, but I'm pretty confident that was my mate Nick from Melbourne. He came along to our comedy special that we had a crack at stand-up, and he's a big Peter Singer fan, so he got us onto it. But... 5% or 10%, mate. What do you do?
Well, that's not what Peter Singer recommends in the first place, right? Peter Singer recommends you have a sliding scale based on whatever your income is, and if you're below a certain amount, it's nowhere. You need to be on quite a serious income before it's 5 or 10%.
Yeah, I actually after getting this question, I went on. I just googled how much should you donate Peter Singer? And it takes you to his website and put in my income, and I have to donate 1.1%. So take that empty.
So I'm roughly that as well. So
that said, though, I didn't donate 1.1%.
You done nothing?
I think I've done zero.
Well, I'm going to shoehorn a rationalisation in because I'm a big values grandstander, as we learned. And my shoehorn rationalisation is something I've started doing is around all my birthdays and all my Christmas presents. Rather than giving presents to my family and them giving me presents, what I've done is we choose a charity, and their present to me is the donation to charity, and my present to them is a donation to charity. So all of a sudden, you're donating $600 or $700 for Christmas, $600 or $700 for my birthday, and then all of a sudden, that's a shoehorn rationalisation in there. So done, mate.
There we go.
Going to heaven.
Hi there, Zoe here. I've actually got 3 questions. My question is, we know you're passionate about great books. What other topics are you interested or well-versed in? And do you think you'll podcast about those someday? I have another question. Have you ever overheard someone talking about the What You Will Learn podcast? What were they saying, and did you surprise them by sharing who you are? My last question is there any topic that great books cover that you just refuse to touch, and why?
Thanks, Zoe. I think me and Ashto both agree that podcasts are an amazing thing. If you're really interested in a topic or you want to enhance your career in a certain area and maybe position yourself as an authority on a topic, podcasts are incredible for that. So it's something I'm using in my career, which is as an engineer in construction. I have another podcast called Wood Solutions Timber Talks. So right now there is massive opportunities in mid-rise timber construction. It's a brand new market. So as on that podcast, I get to speak to all the world's top engineers and architects and so forth on this niche topic.
Yeah, for me, there's nothing that I would commit to a ongoing full-time podcast. But I do also see podcasts being super valuable. And for me, I've actually done a whole bunch of other ones, none of which are still going. But say 2 years ago, I self-published a book. So I did a thing called the Publish a Book podcast where I interviewed 30 self-published authors. Before doing that, I got obsessed with podcasting. So I did the podcast about podcasts, interviewing podcasters. Again, just mainly for learning from some of the best podcasters, how they do it. I love Survivor. I think the question she said, is there anything you're super interested in? That's definitely Survivor. So I did the last 2 seasons of Australian Survivor. I've done an Australian Survivor podcast as well. So yeah, we both love podcasts. We both had a crack at a few different ones. This is certainly our main ongoing regular one, but podcasts are great. The second question she said, have you ever heard anyone in the street talking about it? Unfortunately not. I've got one sort of half almost story. I did one of Seth Godin's online courses. It might have been the marketing seminar or something. And someone in one of the discussion groups, they were talking about how they just heard this cool podcast. There was two blokes who read books and share the best stuff. And I wanted to sneak in there, and I was like, "Oh, what was the name of the podcast?" Ready for the big reveal, saying, "Oh, that was me."
Wasn't you?
It wasn't us. It was a different show.
Oh fuck!
So yeah, I missed that one.
Oh, that sucks. I've had my ears peeled at Dimmicks, thinking if there's anyone going to be speaking about it, it'll be a Dimmicks, looking around, listening to conversations. It's still nothing.
Oh fuck! I laugh because like a couple of days ago, I was in a bookshop and someone was in the business section. They were like, "Oh, I just want to start reading business books now," and I was ready to give my recommendations, but
held back. I've done that as well. The third question was, is there any topic that great books cover that you just refuse to touch, and why?
For me, I think one specific thing, the idea of like the law of attraction, like books like The Secret. There's some very popular books, and we haven't really done it, and I don't know if we will. Like we sort of, at the very start, we were probably both a little bit interested in it, and then as we've gone on, we thought, oh, this is something we should definitely do, and then pull to shreds perhaps. But it's sort of one of those topics that if people love it, they love it, and if they don't know about it, then they're probably not going to get too much out of it.
I think we've had a few emails as well in the past asking us, some people want to hear us review shitty raspberry books. But I think it'd just be a shit episode, man.
Yeah.
If there's nothing good in it, it's like kind of pointless. Another thing we've kind of steered clear of, obviously, is fiction. mainly because it's a little bit harder to review on the podcast, and the lessons aren't so obvious from fiction. It's how you interpret a lot of the messages in them. So it's something we've steered clear of as well.
And to finish it off, we've got 2 more questions. There's sort of a fair crossover between the two. It's a bit of a Venn diagram. They're not the same question, but the question from Jamie from Ireland said, hey guys, my question is, which book most disagreed with your personal beliefs you have, but you now think that the book has changed your outlook or something in your life? And we'll sort of combine this a bit with the last audio question received as well.
Hello, it's Nigel Ashton from Mildura as of now. Just wondering, with all the books you read, most of them seeming to be sort of self-help books, how do you know what's actually good and what's bullshit?
Familiar sounding last name there. Sounds like someone I used to work at a pub with. You. All 3 of us worked at a pub together back in the day.
Big Nige. What's good, what's bullshit? Also, what sort of, Jamie's from Ireland's question, what's most disagreed with you? We thought we'd tie them together because there are a lot of books that sort of fly in the face of each other. Like, there are books that obviously complement each other and reference each other, but there are also ideas that seem to completely contradict each other. So I think to answer Nigel's question, what's good and what's bullshit, you sort of can't know except by reading a whole bunch of stuff. So by being open to a whole bunch of different ideas and reading lots of books, then you can sort of then start to assess for yourself what's good and what's bullshit.
There is a whole bunch of dichotomies with reading. When I first started reading, for example, one concept that came up and seemed to be quite irrefutable was from How to Win Friends and Influence People. And it's a lot about just being nice and listening to people and so forth. But then you read Robert Greene, Laws of Human Nature, and he says, confront your dark side. So with that, there are times when you can't be so nice. You need to actually let the demon out of you and get a bit of C into you as well. And being so nice comes at the cost of a lot of assertiveness. Another dichotomy was early days when we were reading. A lot of the idea of following your passion was such a good way to be. If you're doing something you don't enjoy, what's the point? You're just going out there and wasting your precious time on earth. You should be spending it doing the things you love.
Yeah, and to completely contradict that was Cal Newport's So Good They Can't Ignore You, which said passion is dangerous. Passion is a bad thing. Follow your passion is actually bad advice. So obviously they're 2 completely contradictory ideas. And I think by reading everything, and then you can, get a bit of a sample, probably neither is 100% right, but the answer is probably somewhere in the middle and you can decide for yourself.
Another one for me was a big one that we've got a lot of was like the working hard, the Gary Vee style, hustle, 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 work 12 hours a day, and then you're going to be beat the rest at getting to the goal before everyone else and beat the rest of the pack and so forth. But at the same time, the dichotomy of that is you really need that space in your life, and procrastination does have some kind of value to let your subconscious mind work on problems and so forth.
In the happiness equation, he talked about the last chapter. He talked about how all advice is both like 100% right and also 100% wrong. And he says that all these cliches, there are so many cliches that tend to contradict each other, like birds of a feather flock together and opposites attract, or absence make the heart grow fonder, or versus out of sight, out of mind. And another one is, the pen is mightier than the sword, but then also actions speak louder than words. So it's sort of like there's every cliche there is, and if you think, oh, this is great advice, this cliche, there's going to be another cliche out there that's the exact opposite. So it's sort of that real idea that no one's got the right answer. Everything's probably got some merit to it. So you got to read a lot, learn a lot, and make up those decisions for yourself.
And because they contradict each other, you might feel a little bit confused and disillusioned, but it doesn't necessarily always have to be the case. There are certain times, like life's not just always this pure homogeneous thing. There are times when one book you need to take from, and that's completely true. And there'll be another time in life where there's a completely different circumstance where you can draw from the other thing. But reading really wide and a whole bunch of different books that contradict each other, you can get a hell of a lot out of it.
Yeah, it's very true. It's a sort of a tough one, but that's it. That's the end of our Q&A episode. Big thank you to everybody who submitted a question, whether written or audio. We really enjoyed this episode, and if you've got a different question that didn't get asked today that you think, oh, I wish I could ask these guys a question, head to whatyouwilllearn.com/question, and if we get enough, then we'll do another one of these sort of Q&A episodes.